Hello there, and we're going to analyze the top 8 bracket of uh, GP Buenos Aires, if that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting topic. We have a lot of different decks going on. The most notably two Infuse decks.
Yep,
which
Infuse.
We'll be covering first.
I think they're the exact same deck, because Pip just copied the deck list from insert name.
Yeah, so exact same 75. No different sideboard choices, no different main deck choices. So starting off, kind of explaining how we have insert name, and they are on Infuse, incidentally.
Yep, Infuse.
And the way this deck kind of works is that you get a bunch of cards in the graveyard using various sorts of mill effects or discard effects. And then you cast a Infuse apparatus, which will basically cast its copy of all the spells in your graveyard. Short and sweet of it. And if that casts a Restad's command, that will let you both windfall and then double the amount of do twice the damage amount of cards you drew, but because you've casted all these draw spells prior with the Infuse apparatus, that will kill them.
Yeah.
Them being opponent.
And then you also have the Rini, because you're playing all these ways to get spells into your graveyard. Rini also gets discounted super quickly. Then you can just drop a 2-mana Rini and then follow up with some cantrips. And then you beat down your opponent with Sarah Angels. The thing with the Rini plan is that it's a creature-based beatdown plan. So it attacks on a different axis than the Infuse plus command plan.
Yeah, so in many ways, this kind of Infuse list is a successor to Infuse prior to Last Passage's ban, which was the original win condition Infuse combo decks were playing, which required you to deck out. And Restad's command is kind of a replacement for that, and there's a few other additions to the deck as well. But we needed the main card that kind of makes the deck function differently than prior Infuse lists.
Well, a weakness of this deck is that, for one, actually casting Rini is sort of troublesome, because a good portion of your lands don't cast Rini. So you have to either get 2 lands that can make mana that allows you to cast creatures, or you have to play Arya's Invocation and then use that mana to cast Rini.
Yeah, this deck is kind of a boogeyman at the moment, with both of the top two seeds, which we'll see in a moment, being this exact 75. But there are definitely ways that you can deal with the deck, even though the deck is incredibly powerful and can do stuff like turn 3 kill with a discard spell.
You can also turn 2 Rini off Arya's Invocation. If you manage to discard 2 cards turn 1, you can follow up with Arya's Invocation and then another cantrip, and then just play out Rini on turn 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of the issue with that is that's kind of hard to deal with 4 toughness creature when you're expecting hard spell combo. You can kind of deal with the decks in some ways, where, like, as mentioned, it's kind of hard for this deck to hard cast Rini with Forced Jungle Sanctuary and 2 Channeling Stone, not really being able to cast Rini that well, and only 4 Arya's Invocation to kind of get around that. And kind of differently than the prior Infuse list is that this deck is a bit... Infuse is a bit hard to go off with. Not that it's hard, but the only ritual they're on is Arya's Invocation. So a graveyard without Arya's Invocation, Restad's Command, or Infuse doesn't quite get there. It just draws a bunch of cards, which might be good enough by itself. But despite all that, it's going to be really hard to win through a turn 3 kill with a discard spell. And that's kind of the peak of the deck almost. So definitely a deck that people are finding the favorite to win the tournament.
Yeah. And I mean, the best part about how the brackets are set up is that it's possible for the finals to be an Infuse mirror match. And, like, not even possible, it's actually pretty likely for the finals to be an Infuse mirror match. And that would be quite exciting to see, honestly, because both Infuse decks haven't played each other in a tournament so far. Somehow they managed to dodge each other for an entire tournament.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the Infuse mirror match plays out, because some combo mirror matches can be kind of interesting. Others are just kind of a mulligan snooze fest. But we will see. So moving on, we have another Infuse list. It's exact same setting 5, plays the exact same way, just piloted by Pipsqueak, a different player. And that's a 1 and 2 seeds, so evidently they can find each other in the finals. So, third seed, we have Scribble on Black Red Attrition. So, Scribble's deck kind of takes a bit of inspiration from kind of Unearth decks, in a way, with the Ambitious Necromancer being a very key piece of the deck, where whenever you target one of your opponent's things with a spell, you basically get free Unearth. So even though the deck doesn't play Unearth, it does play 4 Ambitious Necromancers and a lot of ways to trigger it, including the new card Valdez, which, on top of being very good discard and a good top-end card, will trigger the Ambitious Necromancer. And then in addition to that, you have kind of a discard package with Switch Flamebinder, Gift of the Phoenix, Perform Ambition, and that all helps trigger Fire Temper, get stuff in the graveyard for Ambitious Necromancer. And then rounding out the deck, you have some more removal, Parasitic Rebirth, some more discard, and a couple of all-ending Mathuras as kind of a top end, as well as stuff to get back with Ambitious Necromancer.
So it's also running the Profane Emissary plus Polyp Pools combo in order to get a cheap 4 life linker. So you can also place the board pretty well with those cards.
Yeah, definitely. And even though this is kind of a more synergy-focused deck with Ambitious Necromancer and everything kind of working together, Gift of the Phoenix not being really a card we typically see in kind of mid-range shells, this deck can totally just play to the board. Jessica Lieutenant is a pretty good kind of mid-range threat, giving you some filtering, making the opponent discard, perform Ambition, very scary card if the opponent doesn't have any answers for it, as when it flips, it's often 10-10 or bigger.
It's a one-shot machine when it flips.
I think just overall fairly synergistic, but also just kind of solid list that's playing solid cards. So moving on to 4th seed, we have Flying Pinata on New Burn, which is Burn with some new cards,
including Enraptured Countess.
So
surprisingly enough, I don't think I've seen this deck in action this GP so far, because they were always playing the games while I was either commentating another game or asleep.
Yeah, so I've played against this deck and lost to it. I've also played against it earlier versions in League, and it's kind of a very. It always seems to run very smoothly, where the inclusion of Find Greater Purpose, even before any of the new cards, gives the deck a fair amount of draw power. Since the deck is so low curve, you can just stack your lands. Sword and Board is also a very powerful card, and kind of lets you go over top of what burn decks normally are able to do.
Right, so you can just pay 2 mana to deal 2 damage and pump something.
Yeah, and then in addition to kind of the prowess triggers, so it's just in terms of base damage, like 2 mana deal 5 if you can get through it.
Right.
As Ricky mentioned, you have Enraptured Countess, the kind of new card, as you kind of get through hands where you flood it out a bit, flashback your Scorch and whatnot, as well as Carnival Daredevil, which is definitely a very interesting inclusion.
I haven't seen this card in action before.
Yeah, so it's a very neat card, since in some ways it's a 1 mana Ophidian almost.
Assuming it's like Ravagant, but more fair.
Yeah, so when I played against them, I did ask them how it was performing, and they said that it was performing very poorly. They really didn't realize that you could do that without Carnival Daredevil being tapped, which does make it a bit more exciting. Other than that, you just have your typical Prowess, Creature Suite, Pagan Archer, Stormshape Adept, and some of the staple burn spells. Then fairly typical burn sideboard. You know, some Scoriates for Ecos, and Profane Emissaries, Fork Pillars for small creature decks, Rage the Ravage for life gain, or any deck that kind of can't kill very fast. 10 Years Existence is an interesting choice here. I'm not entirely sure what this is trying to hit, but it is a very solid card in general.
I mean, it does hit Rini decks somewhat.
That's True.
It also gets rid of Guardian's tokens, which are a pretty big problem for burn decks.
That is also true. Though I'd be kind of curious to see how it performs, since 18 lands and you're trying to stack your lands with find greater purpose makes me a bit sketchy about how expensive this card is. But
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see it. This top 8 at least.
Yeah.
Um,
So fighting against Fight Pinata is Hersey with Tropic Thunder. So okay, maybe we will see.
Maybe I'll eat my words.
Okay, so Hersey, they're on Tropic Thunder, which is a deck that they've been playing for a very long time, I think. It's a Cane Dancer bounty deck, but it also runs Thunder Roads, which allows it to go over the top by hitting an opponent for 9 and also gaining a bunch of life. And to support that, it runs a very interesting mana base.
Yeah, so it's always Thunder Roads is a bit of an interesting card because you kind of need to want to double splash for both red and white in a lot of ways. Because in order to trigger Thunder Roads, you need to play a spell that's neither red nor white on the same turn. Well, not strictly, but often that's what you want.
But Hersey runs a suite of counter spells, which are usually blue, so you can counter something and then Thunder Roads afterwards.
Yeah, it's also running the other card, Breach the Lilies, which has lots of interesting interactions in the deck, costing 1 green, so it can trigger Thunder Roads proactively if you have 5 mana. It also serves as just a general purpose Cane Dancer. But more interestingly is that it does not exile what it casts, which is particularly useful for this Spirit Script suite of cards they're playing, with Seacast, Spirit Script, Unceasing Flames, Diffuse. So you can kind of keep up your graveyard while also making use of these cards.
Against the burn deck, I think Hersey's probably favored in this matchup because Cane Dancer bounty decks are pretty good against burn decks in general.
Yeah, I'd probably end up agreeing. Hersey does seem to have a fair amount of kind of main deck interaction.
And Thunder Roads is it gains life, it kills stuff. And if you manage to augment it, you just seal the game.
Admittedly, one of the downsides of playing Thunder Road is that your mana base does get a bit on the sketchier side. It's probably not too likely that Hersey will take that much damage, but at the same time, they do kind of want playing like this Unceasing Flames as soon as possible, which could be annoying against such a fast deck. And then in sideboard, they get access to a wider counter suite with Negate, Cosmic Sinkhole, Redo.
I don't think they really want the counter spells in against burn.
Yeah, probably not.
Well, I mean Cosmic Sinkhole, but other than that, I guess Shell Drains because they're playing against a pretty creature-based burn deck.
Yeah, I could see either. Definitely Cosmic Sinkhole seems really good here into the burn matchup, and Shell Drains Rage is kind of also an option, though maybe it's more so based on how many cards they want to take out rather than put it in.
So going into the other, meanwhile, we also have Zhang on Ninjas. And Ninjas, I think, is one of the other decks that has a pretty decent chance against Infuse because they're running Silent Hypnotists.
Yeah, so Ninjas kind of built around Monument of the Format, where they play a bunch of 2-mana creatures, play a Monument of the Format to kind of get around your curve being really awkward, and then set up all these kind of neat creature combos involving Shinrei or Suzume, generally. The most basic one being, of course, just getting a discard creature in play, so either Wailing Course or Garen Pickpocket, and then repeatedly bouncing it and playing it on your opponent's draw step, using Monument to the Format to give it kind of flash, and that will lock your opponent out of the game.
So let's see, looking at the matchups, so Scribble versus Zhang. I think the game probably comes down to whether Zhang can get the lockdown or not. And meanwhile, Scribble is just going to try to disrupt whatever Zhang's trying to do.
Yeah, kind of like instinctively, I'd favor Scribble in this matchup, just because kind of it feels like these mid-range kind of shells are kind of what preys upon these kind of like mono 2-drops, where like a Profane Emissary seems kind of hard for Zhang to deal with. Like even just Valdez kind of dodging the discard lock is also pretty nice. And then you have kind of funny situations with like Fiery Temper being enabled by
Oh yeah, that is pretty
a
hilarious.
opponent's discard. I'm not entirely sure if that kind of more mid-rangey beats, or like bigger mid-range beats smaller mid-range applies here, since both decks are can kind of be a bit more explosive with like Ambitious Necromancer or the Discard Lock. I think it would probably be a bit fairly interesting matchup regardless.
And then we also have Harma Tribal on, I guess, Abzan Rini, Endless Helpless Reenies, whatever you want to call the deck.
Yeah, so this deck uses two of the new cards, Rini, Sundial Archclerk, same card Infuse uses, but in a more fair way, if you can call it that, as well as Valdez.
I mean, a 2-mana 3/4 creature that pumps out the Sarah Angels whenever you cast a spell is you can't say that it's fair because it doesn't enable anything that's degenerate, right? It's just creatures.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, kind of on the front side, maybe you can call it fair, though I think kind of like just with how Harmony Tribal's deck's constructed, it kind of leads you into seeing that Rini might not be the most fair card, where really any of these mono discard decks need to play a pretty resilient set of threats, since the opponent can just top deck out of whatever situation that they find themselves in. But with Rini, there's not really many ways to top deck out of a Rini plus couple Angels, so it really enables this kind of how many discard spells? I guess it's only 11 with the Valdez, but then more with the Endless Helpless Souls.
Yeah.
But these kind of mono interaction suites, especially in Abzan, which is not generally super well known for kind of having resilient finishes. So a few of the things that this deck does that's kind of obviously different than Rini and Infuse is just kind of filling Graveyard naturally, of course. Die Predictions is one way to do that. Find Happiness and Misery is another excellent way to do that. So with Endless Helpless Souls. And you don't really need that many cards in Graveyard for Rini to be incredibly cheap. And you also get some cool interactions with Endless Helpless Souls with Rini. Obviously, if you can cast both, you're very happy. You get a lot of Angels. Find Happiness and Misery is another interesting interaction with Rini, since you can play it prior to Rini, kind of fuel up your graveyard, cast Rini immediately afterwards, and then cast a black spell to trigger the leitmotif and get 2 Angels instead of 1 on your spellcast after Rini.
And if you look at the sideboard, they're running a lot of Grave Hate. They're 3 Sigils of Radiance, 3 Seal of the Tomb, 2 Memento Mori. I think they've come pretty prepared for the Infuse matchup.
Yeah, definitely. Sigil of Radiance is another interesting card with Rini because it actually protects your graveyard, but it also doubles as, you mentioned, Infuse Hate.
Well, it hits the Infuse part of the combo, but not the Rini part of the combo.
Yep. And actually, one of the interesting things about Seal the Tomb is that despite it typically being seen as kind of grave hate, it doesn't actually need to exile the card to perform its action. So it does work even if you have Sigil Radiance down. Right. And the other interesting thing about Seal the Tomb is that with the amount of discard that Harmony Trapper has access to, you can kind of get stuff that might not necessarily go into the graveyard naturally, like Infuse's Rini.
Yeah. Or Infuse's Infuse.
That, definitely that too. So Valdez choosing high will obviously take one of those 2 cards if they're in the opponent's hand, being so expensive. Stolen Sequence, another way to do it, Brain Cry. And then you also have Memento Mori as more grave hate. Maybe be getting kind of excessive at this point, to be honest.
You can never be too excessive against Infuse.
That's true. They definitely come prepared for the top 8 matchup. And then Noctis Upswelling, which normally not very good against combo, is kind of important against combo involving Rini. And it's a very nice choice that they decided to bring Noctis Upswelling instead of Violent Incursion, which is the -3/-3 wipe, because as it turns out, -3/-3 does not kill, say, Angels or Rinis.
And now, finally, there's also the insert name versus RickyRister matchup, aka the Infused matchup that is not very favored for the non-Infused player.
So just talking about the deck a bit, I mean, I'm sure you've been playing this deck for the last, 3 GPs?
2.
one,
Wait,
two is
3.
2.
I mean, technically,
The version of Rejuvenation, whether it has Rejuvenation or not.
Yeah. So the deck runs 1 mana ramp creatures. They ramp from your hand, but they do put you up in lands. And then on 3 mana, you have Recall Forgotten Aeons, which draws your cards and ramps you. Or Untouched Wilds, which ramps you by an insane amount if you have lands in graveyard. And with the mana base you're running, you often do have lands in graveyard. Either it's from fetching or from using the shifting lands. So the ideal start for a deck is turn 1, Laga Recluse, drop a land, turn 2, play another untapped land, and hopefully all 3 of those lands are lands that you can sack. So then you Untouched Wilds, so you untap on turn 3 with 6 mana. And then you play another land, and then play Realms Overturning, and then fulfill Twisted Dreams, and then play Children of the Clouds, and then you
gained 100 life and made 100 bits.
Yeah.
And have some random 5/6s.
I'm hoping to get that draw against Infuse. Although that's actually not, that doesn't actually win the game, because maybe Infuse can just combo off next turn, because my birds don't attack instantly.
Yeah, so with Ideal Draw, you have kind of turns where you make a whole bunch of birds. Infuse, this version of Infuse can deal with that a bit easier than prior versions, because as it turns out, with stats commands in multiple do kind of stack on top of themselves.
Restart command can also clear the board.
Yeah, that's true. Though really, if this turn 3 draw happens, it probably needs a pretty good draw from Infuse to manage to get out of it.
Yeah.
And as Ricky mentioned, there is some Infuse hate in the sideboard, with the Forbidden Treasures 4 being pretty scary against that hits Infuse, the card itself, and Sacrificial Bull as well. And well, Sacrificial Bull is generally probably too slow for most decks, because this Rejuvenation runs so many lands and so many ramp spells. Sacrificial Bull can really get going, and as we mentioned when we talked about Infuse the deck itself, this version can potentially be turned off by enough single grave hate. You need to have a lot of it, but it's doable.
And Sacrificial Bull with a bunch of green mana is the perfect example of that.
And kind of as maybe on the off chance you can, Infuse doesn't have a great combo draw anyways, so they restart command for 20-ish damage, and Sacrificial Bull gains you some life, maybe.
I mean, actually, if you manage to get the Children's for a bunch, maybe Infuse actually just runs out of damage to kill you.
Yeah, it's possible. It'd probably be dependent on how they draw, whether they can do 60 plus damage.
Is it even possible for them to do 60 plus?
Well, the first Rasad's command is hitting for probably around 20, and then so 10 cards drawn, and then the second one with 10 cards drawn, Windfalls, and that's another 7 cards drawn or whatever.
Right.
So it's doing 34, even without counting for more draw spells in between. And then the third one, though it would require a pretty good draw from this Infused deck to get to the third Rasad's command.
I mean, it would require a pretty good draw from the Rejuvenation deck to get birds for 40 super early against Infuse.
Yeah, you need to get a very good draw, turn 3, and then you do it turn 3, and you need to be on the play, because Infuse might just kill you if you're on the draw. Looking at the brighter side of the matchup, Rini is not really a problem with the 2 board wipes and sideboard, and Rini might honestly just not be able to beat a whole bunch of birds.
I mean, Rejuvenation is pretty good against creature-based decks, just because birds is such a good response to creatures.
Yeah, this deck is definitely not tuned towards heavy combo matchups. Ricky did manage to beat Crazy Train in the top 8 tiebreaker to get into the top 8.
Yeah, but they top deck lands most of game 3.
But kind of key interaction piece there, end of all things, does not really work against Infuse.
You can technically counter 1 Rini activation with it, but yeah.
That is true. But it doesn't even hit the mana base if you want to kind of try and go on that angle. So it's definitely going to be a bit of a rough road ahead in Ricky's first top 8 matchup. Though I have faith that Infuse can draw poorly and Ricky can draw well. And
thank you.
And really, if you're confident enough, anything can happen.
Yeah.
So, and that's the last player in the top 8. So kind of any predictions on who you want to win and who you think will win?
Okay,
Or which
so
deck?
personally, I'm hoping for an Infuse mirror in the finals because that would be absolutely hilarious. And probably the last time that Infuse will actually get played in GP because I know that that's going to get nerfed really hard next month. At least I predict that's going to get nerfed super hard next month, along with Rini. So this is the last chance to play those super broken cards together in a deck.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit funny that chances are the prior Infuse deck got kind of 2 cards hit off it with Last Passage and Crystal Conjuration. And this new Infuse deck will also probably get 2 cards hit off it in some fashion. And normally you only see one pixel card being nerfed. But we'll see what happens.
I mean, Rini nerf will probably kill the blue-white Rini deck because that deck really relied on having a cheap Rini.
Yeah.
But
So
at the same time, that deck wasn't really the best Rini deck around.
yeah, but Blue-White Rini has not gone on top 8, so you're predicting a Infuse victory and hoping for an Infuse double victory, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, if that doesn't happen, because I guess Hamid Tribal does have a chance of beating Infuse. And then if I draw really well, I can also have a chance of beating Infuse.
Actually, for my prediction, I'm gonna be a bit of a kind of go against the grain here and say that Hamid Tribal might on Abzan Rini, mainly just because of the sideboard being so heavily teched against Infuse. I think Hamid Tribal will take this.
Well, I'd still be happy with the Hamid Tribal victory because that's still a Rini deck that's winning.
So I guess I'm going to predict not Infuse to win, if that's a bet I can take. Probably not a favorable bet, since Infuse is a really strong deck and can always win against basically everything.
Yeah, but you can always crumble to hate if you get unlucky.
Yeah. And kind of one of the things about combo is that you can just kind of randomly lose games, where if you do just don't draw Infuse, or in this deck's case, just don't draw a Stad's command, it can be kind of, you can't really do that much about it. You just kind of go to the next game.
Yeah. I mean, before the Last Passage ban when I was playing Infuse, I still never managed to get a top 8 because I kept losing games to some of those losses were misplays, but some of the other losses were just luck. Because combo decks, especially if your opponent's playing hate pieces, then sometimes combo decks just don't line up.
Yeah, I want to say that the first GP you played, Infuse, which might have been, I think, was the first game Infuse saw, combo Infuse saw. You proceeded to turn to kill the opponent in game 1, and then just didn't find an Infuse in the top 30 cards in game 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Which, not a likely scenario. I think we mapped that out to be sub 1% to not have Infused the top 30 in 2 games in a row. But that is just something that can happen. And really, with the amount of interactions some of these decks are playing, Hamid Tribal having a ton of interaction on sideboard, and Ninjas having just a bunch of Silent Hymn to some Forbidden Treasures, some Chic Eyes Shootouts. With this amount of hate, Infuse can definitely drop games. And if another game is dropped to kind of poor draws, Infuse can definitely fall out here.
Yeah. I mean, either ways, if Infuse wins or not, it's still going to be Pro Tour Rini, especially if you also consider all of the blue-white Rini decks that didn't do so well.
Yeah, very true. And we'll see if Infuse still survives after this GP, or it eats a ban or nerf, and same with the Rini. Maybe Infuse will be kneecapped in other ways, or maybe we just have to suck it up and all sideboard our grave hate.
I mean, you can always run Sealed Riftway.
That is objectively true. I'm not sure. And I mean, Sealed Riftway is a very reasonable card, a very strong card. But I don't think people like playing Sealed Riftway. I'm just gonna get that impression.
What? I mean, don't you like 1 mana draw a card, and then you have to keep up 2 mana for the rest of the game?
I like Sealed Riftway. I think that I try and main deck it even. I think Sealed Riftway is a very good card.
It's a good main deck card when you can seal the Sealed Riftway.
Yeah, you can make the very punny deck and beat the opponent down with puns. But I don't think very many other people have my like for Sealed Riftway. But that is the GP Buenos Aires top 8. The decks at least. And we'll see how the top 8 plays out itself.